So here we are out in our maple orchard out in the woods here in New Hampshire, and what we use now to tap our trees, which helps save on a lot of labor, is a tubing system. And the tubing system goes from tree to tree to tree. We have to have a slope so the sap will flow downhill into a large tank at the bottom of the hill. It saves us a lot of labor. So in tapping the trees, we usually tap our trees here in this region of New Hampshire in late February. And that's when the temperatures start warming up above freezing at night, but still freezing during the nighttime hours and warmer during the day. So we start drilling our trees. So we drill a small hole, just about as big around as a pencil, just into the sapwood of the tree. This is the spout here where the sap goes in, and we just tap it in slowly, and we're all set. So the sap will run out of the tree, down into the tubing, and on the way down to the big tank at the bottom of the hill. Okay, so here we are up near our hay fields where the ground is flat, so we can't use our tubing. And what historically, sap buckets were hung on maple trees, and we still hang some sap buckets today where it's too flat to use our tubing system. So we have an old-fashioned metal spout. Once again, we've drilled our hole in the tree, and we tap this in, just barely so it's in there. And in a minute, you'll see the sap dropping out of the spile. But this bucket hangs right on that spout like that. And then to keep the snow, because we still are getting snow this time of year when we're making syrup, we put a lid on it. And that keeps all the snow and the rain out of the bucket. Now, when the sap is running well, it's very easily to fill this sap bucket in a day with the sap from the maple tree. So that's historically how everybody made syrup, was using sap buckets. And we still use them today. So now we're down here gathering sap. We'll see what this sap has run today or not. So this is full of sap, and it was cold last night, so there's actually a little bit of ice in here too, which we're going to throw away. But as the sap has dripped out of this spout, you can still see it dripping. This bucket is almost full, so we've had a nice run of sap today. And we're going to just take this out very carefully. We pour it into my bucket. Nice clear sap, crystal cold. This will make some beautiful syrup. And then we just hang the bucket back up. We put the lid back on. It's still dripping, so we're going to even get more sap this afternoon. And then I'll take my bucket of sap and we'll pour it in the big tank, take it up to the sugar house, and we'll start boiling and making syrup. Welcome to our sugar house here in New Hampshire. This is where we make all our maple syrup here on the farm, commonly called a sugar house or a sap house. And this is where we do all the boiling of our syrup. And the sap comes from the maple tree, obviously, and the sugar maple only grows here in northern North America on the East Coast. It's very specific to this region, and it has the highest sugar content in the sap of any of the maple trees, and that's where we make the syrup from. So we start with that. When sap comes out of the tree, it looks just like water. We'll take a look at that a little bit later, and it has about 2% sugar in it. We have to boil off 39 to 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup out of that sap. So we concentrate it quite a bit in order to make that 1 gallon of maple syrup that we do every year. And the season here in New Hampshire is anywhere from late February through early April. It's about a 6-week season, and we need freezing nights and warm sunny days like we have today. So anything down in the the mid-20s Fahrenheit up into the 40-degree region, early to mid-40s is perfect for sugaring. So there's where we start, and when we have a second, we'll go on inside and we'll start talking about the process of how we make it. So here we are in our woodshed, and we use wood-fired evaporator, which we'll show you in a minute. But we use wood off our farm as a heat source to boil all our sap with. When our woodshed is full, it holds about 40 quarts, and we normally use all of it to make our sap into syrup for the whole season. So not only is it a lot of work during the season making the syrup, is a lot of preparatory time cutting all this wood all year long in order to fill the woodshed. And there's not a lot of people that use wood to fire big evaporators like ours anymore. A lot of the modern ones use oil or things like that to boil their syrup with. But we're very traditional. We still use wood, and like I said, we burn about 40 cords. And when we go inside the actual sugar house, we'll fire up, and I'll show you how that works. Hi, so now we're here back at the sugar house, and this is our big sap tank that holds all of our sap for the day. And if you notice, we have this larger blue pipe where those smaller pipes in the sugar orchard all feed into this larger pipe, and it all runs by gravity here into the sugar house. And this is what stores our sap for the day. This holds 2,500 gallons, and on a good day and during sugaring season, we can fill this with sap. And that will take me about 12 hours to process through the evaporator when we're boiling it. So from our large sap tank, our storage tank down here in the storage room, from there we pump it upstairs into this smaller tank, and from there it runs by gravity through these copper pipes into the evaporator where we boil it. So we can process about 200 gallons of that raw sap an hour into maple syrup. We don't run very much sap in this at all. We only have this about an inch deep. And this is segmented, so it zigzags its way across to the other side of the pan, all the while losing all this steam. And we can boil off about 200 gallons of water into steam every hour. Like I said, remember it's about 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. And if we can get rid of 200 gallons into steam, that makes about 5 gallons of syrup an hour for us on this evaporator. Now, because we're using such an inconsistent heat source as wood, it's very difficult to actually finish syrup here on the evaporator itself. Come on around the other side, and we'll take a look at where the syrup is coming off. Remember, raw sap is coming in one end, it flows through this system, and we're getting almost syrup here coming off this end right here. And we use temperature to monitor this. Now, syrup is finished when it boils at 7 degrees above the boiling point of water. And as we all know, the boiling point of water can vary depending on your elevation or atmospheric pressure. So we get it very close here. You know, when the temperature reads about 219 degrees, we'll start drawing it off. If it gets a little hotter, we'll open up the valve and bring it off a little bit faster. If it cools off, we'll slow it down. But this is just a guideline. It's almost ready for syrup here. And I tell you what, we're going to just shut this off. We're going to trade buckets. And I'll show you what we do with this next. Here in this small little side pan called a finishing pan, this is heated with propane, so it's much easier to control the final cooking process here. We always filter our syrup when we move it because we get a lot of minerals and precipitants that come out of the sap when we boil it, and it's very dark and very muddy. It's kind of surprising how dark the mud is that we filter out of this to make a nice clear product. So this is heated with propane, and it's, like I said, it's much easier to finish the product here. So we monitor this until it reaches the exact right temperature or consistency. Then we can shut the propane off, we filter it, and we bottle it up. Hi, we're back, and we're going to talk about sap a little bit as it comes out of the maple tree. And I'm going to pour it in here. We're going to do a little test on this to find out how much sugar there is in the sap itself. So as you can see, it's clear like water when it comes out of the tree, and you really can't tell the difference between this and water. unless you actually taste it. And it has just a very faint hint of a maple, not even really a maple flavor, just kind of a little bit of a sweet flavor to it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to test the sugar content of the sap. And like I said, normally it runs around 2%. This is a hydrometer, and this actually will measure the sugar content in the sap for us. So we just float this in here, and I can read it on the scale, and it reads just 2.5%, 2.4, maybe 2.5% sugar in the sap, and that's actually pretty good. The more sugar in the sap, the less sap it takes to make that gallon of syrup. So right now it's probably about 37, maybe 38 gallons to make that 1 gallon of syrup. That's what we do with our sap. So every time that we boil here in the sugar house every day, we take a sample of maple syrup for our records of what we've produced for that particular day. And generally speaking, the lightest syrup is made in the beginning of the season, and as we progress through the season over the period of a 4 to 6 week period, the syrup generally gets darker and darker. Generally speaking, the darker the syrup, the stronger the flavor. So here in the state of New Hampshire, which is uniform throughout the Northeast here, we have to have the grading of the syrup. The lightest syrup is a nice golden delicate taste. As it begins to darken, it's called rich taste. And then toward the end of the season, it's called a robust taste. So it has a nice, strong maple flavor. And it really comes down to what your preference is. If you like something very delicate and light, you would prefer the light amber. If you want more stronger flavor, you would go for a darker syrup. So over the course of the season, we take what Mother Nature gives us. We don't have any control over it. And that is how syrup is graded here in the Northeast. Okay, so this year we've boiled several times, and these are all the samples of the maple syrup that we've made this year so far. This was the very first time in late February when we started making syrup this year. Every day that we boiled, like I said, we take a sample of it, and we started out a little on the medium side, and then it lightened up into that delicate flavor syrup here. And then we had a spell where it warmed up and we made some darker syrup. And then we got cooled off again and we started making light syrup again. So there can be some variation on what Mother Nature gives us throughout the course of the year. But these beautiful samples of syrup are what come out of our wonderful maple trees here in New Hampshire.